Am I the asshole for kicking out my unemployed boyfriend who had moved cities to live with me, knowing fully well he had nowhere else to go? I didn't think I'd ever be the kind of person to ask the internet if I was the problem. But here I am. Because when I told my boyfriend to pack his things and leave my apartment, knowing fully well he had nowhere stable to go, he looked at me like I had just betrayed him in the worst way possible. Like I had ripped the ground out from under someone who trusted me. And the worst part? A small, ugly part of me still wonders if he's right. For context, I'm 24F, he's 26M, let's call him Kevin. When I first met Kevin, he felt like one of those rare people who come into your life fully formed. Like he knew exactly how to be a good partner without needing to be taught. It wasn't flashy, over-the-top romance. It was consistent. On our first date, he showed up early. Not just early, prepared. He had already picked a place I'd mentioned liking in passing, and he remembered small things I didn't even realize I'd said out loud. He held doors open, pulled my chair out in that slightly awkward but sincere way, and never once checked his phone while we were talking. And yes, he paid. Not in a show-off way. He didn't make it weird or transactional. It was just natural to him. Like he wanted to take care of things without making it a big deal. I remember calling my friend that night and saying, I think I just met someone who actually gets it. The first year of our relationship felt like something out of a movie, but the quieter kind. The kind that doesn't rely on dramatic highs and lows. We were long distance for that entire year. I had my job in the city I live in now, a standard 9-to-5, stable, not glamorous, but secure. Kevin lived in another city a few hours away. We saw each other when we could, but most of our relationship existed in phone calls, late-night texts, and small routines we built across distance. Every week, without fail, he sent me flowers. Not always expensive ones. Sometimes it was just a simple bouquet. But they showed up like clockwork. Mondays, usually. Like a reset button for the week. There was always a small note attached. Nothing poetic or dramatic. Just things like, hope this week's easier on you. Eat properly, I know you skip meals when you're busy. Thinking of you. It sounds small, but those things add up. They build something steady. He'd call me after work and tell me about his day, his coworkers, his plans, his ideas for the future. He wasn't rich, but he talked like someone who had direction. Like someone who was building towards something. He had ambition, or at least he sounded like he did. He talked about moving up in his field, about eventually starting something of his own, about how he didn't want to settle for just getting by. And I believed him because everything else about him lined up with that version of himself. He was thoughtful, he was attentive. He was reliable, and more importantly, he made me feel chosen, not in a possessive way, just intentionally. So when we hit our 1-year mark, I didn't hesitate when he brought up closing the distance. It came up during one of our visits. We were lying on my couch, half watching something neither of us was really paying attention to. He said casually, "What if I just moved here?" I remember turning to look at him like I hadn't heard him properly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he shrugged. "We've done the long distance thing. It works, but why keep doing it if we don't have to?" I laughed a little. "You'd just move? Like that?" "I don't see why not." And then more softly, "I want to build something real with you, not just visit it." That sentence stuck with me. I didn't even question it the way I probably should have. Looking back, I can see there were things I didn't ask. Important things. Like, what about his job? What about his finances? What about the logistics of moving to a new city? But at the time, it all felt romantic. Spontaneous, but in a good way. Like we were choosing each other in a bigger, more permanent sense. I had a stable apartment. My job tied me to the city anyway. I couldn't just pick up and move even if I wanted to. So him coming to me felt like the only practical option, and it felt considerate. He was the one making the change, the sacrifice. At least that's how I saw it then. We talked about it for a couple of weeks. Not deeply, just enough to make it feel real. He reassured me that he'd figure things out once he got here. "I'm not worried," he said. "I'll work remotely. I can manage that." And again, I believed him. Because why wouldn't I? This was the same person who had been steady for an entire year. The same person who showed up consistently, who made effort without being asked, who seemed like he had his life together. So I said yes to him moving in with me. I said yes to sharing my space, my routines, my everyday life, and to what I thought was the next step in something solid. The move itself was surprisingly easy. Too easy, maybe. He arrived with less than I expected. A couple of suitcases, his gaming setup, some clothes, a few personal things. Nothing that screamed, "This is someone who's uprooting an entire life." I remember joking about it. "Is that all you own?" He grinned. "Travel light." At the time, I thought it was just one of his quirks. Minimalist, uncomplicated. We spent the first couple of days settling in, rearranging things, making space for him, figuring out how to share a place that had only ever been mine. It felt good. Domestic in a way I hadn't experienced before. Waking up next to him, cooking together, even something as simple as grocery shopping felt different. Like this was what we had been building toward. And then, 3 days after he moved in, he told me something that probably should have changed everything immediately. But it didn't. Not right away. We were sitting at the kitchen table. I had just gotten back from work, still half in my work mode, checking emails on my phone. He was unusually quiet. I noticed it, but I didn't think much of it at first. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded but didn't meet my eyes. "Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about something." That was the moment, I think. The moment where, if I had paid closer attention, I would have seen the shift coming. I put my phone down. What's up? He hesitated. Then he said, almost casually, so I left my job before I moved. He clarified. I had to. That didn't make sense. Had to? Why? Well, he shrugged. I was moving cities. It didn't make sense to stay. I stared at him. You didn't tell me that. I didn't want you to worry. That sentence should have made alarms go off in my head. It didn't. Instead, I asked the question that, at the time, felt like the most reasonable one. So what's the plan now? He leaned back in his chair, like he had already thought this through. I'll find something here. It might take a little time, but it's fine. How long is a little time? He smiled like I was overthinking it. A few weeks, maybe a month. And then, more softly, I just need you to be a little patient with me. Things might be tight for a bit. That was the first time he said something that hinted at change. I might not be able to do everything I used to, he added. You know, the flowers, the dates, all that. I remember shaking my head immediately. I don't care about that. And I meant it. Or at least I thought I did. I just want you here, I said. And that was the truth. At that point, it still felt like a temporary adjustment, a small compromise for something bigger. People go through transitions, jobs change, situations shift. That's normal. That's what I told myself. He reached across the table and took my hand. I knew you'd understand. And just like that, the conversation ended. No real plan. No timeline. No details. Just trust. Looking back now, I realized something uncomfortable. That was the moment the balance shifted. I just didn't notice it yet. Because in my head, we were still the same couple we had always been. The one built on consistency. The one where effort was mutual. The one where temporary actually meant temporary. I didn't know then how quickly that version of us was about to disappear. Or how long I would keep pretending it hadn't. If you had asked me 2 weeks after Kevin moved in whether anything felt off, I would have said no. Not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was wrong enough yet to feel alarming. That's how it starts, I think. Not with something big and obvious, but with small things you can explain away if you try hard enough. The first few days after that conversation, I told myself to be supportive. He had just moved cities. Of course he needed time to adjust. Of course job hunting wouldn't be immediate. People need a moment to breathe, to settle, to figure things out. So I didn't push. I went to work like usual. He stayed home. At first it felt nice. Coming back to someone, knowing he was there. Even if nothing else had changed yet, the idea of us sharing a space still carried this quiet excitement. But then I started noticing things. Not all at once, not in a dramatic movie scene kind of way. The first thing was the dishes. I remember coming home one evening, exhausted after a long day, and walking into the kitchen to find the sink full. Not just from that day, like it had been building up. Plates, mugs, a pan with something dried onto it. It wasn't a disaster, it just wasn't done. Kevin was in the living room, headset on, laughing at something through his mic. Hey, I called out, dropping my bag. He turned slightly, lifted a hand in acknowledgement, but didn't take the headset off. Give me a sec, he mouthed. I nodded, even though he wasn't really looking at me anymore. I stood there for a moment longer than I needed to, staring at the sink. Then I sighed and started washing the dishes. It didn't feel like a big deal. I told myself he probably meant to do it. Or he lost track of time. Or even he'll help next time. That's how the excuses started. Small, harmless, easy. Later that night, when he finally took his headset off, I mentioned it lightly. Hey, can you try to keep up with the dishes during the day? It gets a bit overwhelming after work. He looked genuinely apologetic. Yeah, of course, my bad, I just got caught up. And then he kissed my forehead like that settled it. And for that moment, it did. The next day, I came home to a clean sink. I remember feeling relieved. See, I was overthinking. He just needed a little nudge. But then, 2 days later, it was the same again. And then it became a pattern. Clean, messy, clean, messy. Just consistent enough to keep me from calling it a problem, but inconsistent enough to keep bothering me. The second thing was his job search. At first, I didn't question it. I'd leave in the morning, and he'd say things like, I'm going to look at some listings today, or I've got a couple of things to check out. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? But then one day, I came home earlier than usual. My boss had let us leave early, and I remember feeling oddly excited, like I was coming home to something. When I walked in, Kevin was exactly where I'd left him that morning. Same spot on the couch, same headset, same game on the screen. He didn't even notice me at first. I stood there for a few seconds, watching. It wasn't just that he was playing, it was how absorbed he was, completely tuned out from everything else. Hey, I said finally. He flinched slightly like I'd startled him. Oh, hey, you're early. Yeah, I said, glancing at the screen. What have you been up to? Just this, he admitted, gesturing vaguely. I waited. He didn't add anything. No job stuff today, I asked. He leaned back, stretching like he'd just finished something exhausting. I'll get to it, he said. I just needed a break today. A break. From what, I didn't ask. I didn't want to sound nagging or impatient or unsupportive. So I nodded. Okay. And I let it go. But that was the first moment something felt off in a way I couldn't quite ignore. Because a break implies effort before it, and I hadn't seen any. Over the next couple of weeks, the pattern became clearer. He stayed home and gamed. He talked about gaming more and more, not just as a hobby, but like it was something bigger. I've been getting really good, he told me one night, eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen when he talked about jobs. There are people who make a career out of this, he continued. Streaming, esports, it's a real thing now. I nodded slowly. Yeah, but that's pretty competitive, right? Everything is, he shot back, not aggressively but firmly. Jobs too. That was true. Technically, but it didn't feel like the same kind of argument. I'm just saying, he went on, this could be my thing. Like, what if I actually commit to it? I didn't answer right away because I didn't know what the right answer was. If I discouraged him, I'd be the girlfriend who didn't believe in him. If I supported it blindly, I'd be ignoring reality. So I did what I had been doing since he moved in. I chose the middle. I mean, if that's something you really want, I said carefully, you should still have a backup plan, at least for now. He didn't look convinced. I do have a plan, he said. I just need time to build it. Time, that word again. It started showing up in everything he said. I'll apply later. I'll figure it out. I just need a bit more time. And slowly, without either of us explicitly saying it, my role in the relationship started to change. I became the one who left every morning. The one who paid rent, the one who bought groceries, and the one who kept things functioning. At first, I didn't resent it. I told myself this was temporary. That relationships aren't always 50-50 all the time. Sometimes one person carries more. That's normal. That's what I believed. But then the effort on his side started disappearing in other ways too. It wasn't just about money. It was everything. He stopped planning dates. Not even cheap ones, not even simple ones like a walk or a movie night he set up himself. If we did anything, it was because I initiated it. Do you want to go out this weekend? I'd ask. Yeah, sure, he'd say. But he never asked first. The flowers stopped too. At first I told myself it made sense. He had said things would be tight. But then I realized something. It wasn't about the flowers themselves. It was about the effort behind them. The thought, the intention, and that was gone too. No notes, no small gestures, nothing to replace what had been there before. Just absence. One night I brought it up. Not accusingly, just honestly. I miss how things used to be, I said, sitting next to him on the couch. He glanced at me, then back at his screen. What do you mean? Just the little things, I said. The effort, the way you used to. I'm the same person, he cut in. I didn't say you weren't. Then what's the problem? I hesitated. Because suddenly it felt like there was a problem. I just didn't know how to explain it without sounding ungrateful. I just feel like things have changed, I said finally. He sighed, taking his headset off and rubbing his face. I'm going through a lot right now, he said. You know that. There it was, the shift. The moment where his situation became something I had to navigate carefully. I know, I said quickly. I'm not trying to pressure you, I just... Then don't, he said, not harshly, but firmly. Silence settled between us, and in that silence I felt something new. Not anger, not even frustration, just distance. Like we were no longer on the same page, but I was the only one trying to read the book. After that, I stopped bringing it up as much. It felt easier to adjust myself than to push him, so I picked up more slack and I cleaned and cooked more. I worked my full-time job and came home to a space that didn't feel equally shared anymore. And Kevin? He settled into a routine that didn't include me as much as it used to. He woke up late, gamed, streamed sometimes, talked about improving, promised he'd look into jobs tomorrow. And just like that, tomorrow became a moving target. Always close enough to believe in, but never close enough to arrive. And the thing is, if he had been miserable, it might have been easier. If he had looked broken or desperate or even just trying, I think I would have felt more certain in supporting him, but he didn't. He looked comfortable, and that's what started to bother me the most. Not that he needed time, but that he seemed perfectly fine taking it from me. And still, even then, I didn't think I would ever ask him to leave. Because somewhere in my head, I was still holding on to the version of him who sent flowers every Monday. I just didn't realize that version of him might not exist anymore, or worse, that it never really did in the way I thought it did. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't hit you all at once. It builds quietly. You don't wake up one day and think, I'm drained. You just start noticing that things you used to do easily now feel heavier. Cooking feels like a task. Cleaning feels endless. Even conversations feel like something you have to prepare for. That's where I was by the third month of Kevin living with me. Not broken, not even fully resentful. Just tired in a way I couldn't explain without sounding dramatic, and then he asked me for money. The first time, it didn't even sound like a big deal. We were sitting on the couch. I had just finished paying my bills for the month, mentally calculating what I had left for groceries and everything else. He muted his game and said almost casually, Hey, can I ask you something? Yeah, I said, not really looking up from my phone. Do you think you could, spot me a bit of money for now? That made me pause. How much? Nothing crazy, he said quickly. Just a monthly thing, until I figure my own stuff out. I looked at him properly then. A monthly thing? Yeah, he said, like it was the most reasonable idea in the world. Just pocket money. You know how it is. A guy needs something on him to function. Something about the way he said it, a guy needs something on him, sat weird with me. Function for what? I asked. He shrugged. Just stuff. Going out, grabbing things, not feeling broke all the time. That part I understood. No one likes feeling broke. I'll pay you back, he added quickly. Obviously, once I start earning. There it was again. Always a future version of him that would fix everything. I hesitated. Not because I couldn't afford a small amount, but because something about the principle of it felt off. But then the other thoughts came in louder. He moved here for you. He left his job. You said you'd support him. It's temporary. So I nodded. Okay, just don't make it a habit. He smiled immediately, like the conversation had gone exactly how he expected. It's not going to be, he said. I just need a little help right now. That was the beginning. The first month it was small. A set amount, nothing extreme. I told myself it was manageable. But then I started noticing where that money was going. One evening I walked in and saw him unusually excited. What? I asked, dropping my bag. Check this out, he said, turning his screen toward me. I didn't fully understand what I was looking at. Something about his character looked different. New skin, he said, grinning. Limited drop. I blinked. You bought that? Yeah, he said. Had to, it's rare. I stared at him for a second longer than I meant to. With what money? He looked at me like the answer was obvious. The money you gave me. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, just said simply like a fact. I don't know what I expected. Maybe that he'd say he'd saved some of it, or that it was something necessary. But this? It felt off. I thought you needed it for, like, actual stuff, I said slowly. It is actual stuff, he replied, frowning slightly. This matters in the game. It's part of building my profile. Profile, as if this was a career already. I didn't argue, not really. I just said okay and went to the kitchen. But something shifted in me that day. Not a full realization, just a crack. Because suddenly the money didn't feel like support anymore. It felt like something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet. After that, the pocket money became expected. Not discussed each month, just assumed, and the amount slowly increased, not dramatically, just enough that I noticed. Hey, can you add a bit extra this time, he'd say. I've got some things I want to get. It's just for now. Always just for now. And then came the smaller things. The kind that are easy to ignore at first. I'd leave some cash on the counter, maybe for groceries, or something I planned to pick up later. And then it would be gone. The first time I thought I had misplaced it. The second time I asked, Hey, did you see the cash I left here? Oh yeah, he said casually. I took some, I'll put it back later. He didn't even seem to think he needed to ask before borrowing cash. Can you just tell me next time, I said. Yeah, he replied, already turning back to his screen. It kept happening, not always, just enough times to make it a habit, enough to make me start double-checking things, enough to make me feel uneasy in my own space. And then the argument started. Not small disagreements, but actual fights. The first real one happened over something stupid. It was late. I had just gotten home after an exhausting day and the apartment was a mess. Clothes on the floor, empty wrappers on the table, dishes in the sink, again. Kevin was in the middle of a game. Can you pause for a second, I asked. I'm in a match, he said, eyes glued to the screen. It'll take 2 seconds. Not right now. Something in me snapped. Kevin, I've been at work all day. The least you could do is keep the place clean. I said I'll get to it, he replied, irritation creeping into his voice. When? I asked, because it's always later with you. That got his attention. He pulled his headset down, looking at me properly. What's your problem? My problem? I repeated. My problem is I'm doing everything while you sit here all day. I'm not just sitting here, he shot back. I'm working on something. Playing games is not working, Kevin. It can be, he said louder now. You just don't get it. No, I get it, I said. I get that you're not even trying to find a real job. By his expression, it looked as though that was a wrong thing to say, but I was simply stating the truth. His expression changed instantly. You think I'm not trying? I haven't seen you try, I said before I could stop myself. Silence, heavy and sharp. Then he laughed, but there was no humor in it. Wow, he said. That's what you think of me? That's not what I meant. You know it. No, it is, he cut in. You think I'm just some useless guy sitting around doing nothing? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The conversation spiraled after that. Everything I said turned into something else. Every point I tried to make became proof that I didn't support him, didn't believe in him, didn't appreciate what he had given up to be here. And somehow I ended up apologizing. I didn't mean it like that, I said eventually, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. I'm just stressed. He didn't respond right away. He just sat there, letting the silence stretch. Then he sighed. I'm going through a lot too, he said. You don't think this is hard for me? And just like that, the fight shifted. From what he wasn't doing to what he was feeling. I know, I said quickly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have snapped. That became the pattern. We'd argue. I'd bring up something real. It would turn into something emotional. And I would end up apologizing. Not because I was always wrong, but because it felt easier than letting things stay broken. Because every time we fought, there was this underlying thought in my head. You brought him here. If this falls apart, it's on you. And that thought kept me quiet longer than it should have. As the months went on, my life started shrinking. Not in obvious ways, just gradually. I worked more, took on extra tasks just to stay on top of everything. Came home more tired than before and ate whatever was easiest instead of what was healthy. I slept less. I didn't notice how bad it had gotten until I got sick. It wasn't anything serious. Just a bad flu, but it hit me harder than usual. Fever, body aches, the kind of exhaustion that makes even getting out of bed feel like too much. I remember lying there staring at the ceiling, thinking, I just need a day. One day to rest, to be taken care of maybe. Kevin was in the living room. I could hear him talking, laughing, and playing. Hey, I called weakly. No response. I tried again, louder this time. He walked in after a minute, headset still around his neck. I don't feel well, I said. He glanced at me. You're probably just tired. I think I have a fever. Take something for it, he said. There's medicine in the cabinet. I waited for something else. Concern, maybe, or a question, but nothing came. Can you maybe get it for me? I asked. He hesitated. I'm in the middle of something, he said. Just grab it when you can. And then he left the room. I lay there for a long time after that. Not crying, not even angry, just quiet, because something clicked at that moment. Not loudly or dramatically, but clearly. If I didn't take care of myself, no one else was going to. So I got up. On shaky legs, head spinning, I walked to the kitchen, found the medicine, poured myself water, and took it. I went back to bed, and over the next few days, I did everything myself: soup, medication, even cleaning up after myself. Kevin checked in occasionally. You good? Yeah, I'd say. But that would be it. No extra effort. No stepping in, just distance. By the time I recovered, something in me had shifted again. Not completely. I wasn't ready to make any big decisions yet, but the thought had planted itself persistently. And impossible to ignore once you noticed it. I started wondering, not for the first time but more seriously now, what exactly I was holding on to, and whether it still existed at all. People imagine a breaking point as something loud. A slammed door, a raised voice, a moment where everything spills out at once and there's no going back. Mine wasn't like that, mine was quiet. So quiet that if you had walked into the room, you wouldn't have known anything had changed. But it had. Completely. It happened on a random weekday. Nothing dramatic had led up to it. No fight that morning, no argument the night before, just the same routine we had been living in for months. I woke up early, got ready for work. Kevin was still asleep. I stood there for a moment looking at him. And I don't know why, but something in me just paused. Not in a loving way, not even in a resentful way, just observant and thoughtful. Like I was looking at him from a distance for the first time. That day at work, I couldn't focus. It wasn't because of anything specific, just this growing, persistent thought in the back of my mind. What is he actually doing all day? Not what he says he's doing, but what he's actually doing. I had asked before, indirectly, carefully, but I had never really checked, and for the first time I realized how strange that was. We lived together. I was supporting both of us, and I had no real idea what his days looked like beyond what he chose to show me. That thought stayed with me the entire day. By the time I got home, it hadn't gone away. Kevin was on the couch as usual, headset on, game running, voice animated, nothing new. Hey, I said. He lifted a hand without turning around. I went into the kitchen, set my bag down, and stood there for a second. Then I made a decision that, at the time, didn't feel like a big one. Just something small. I walked back into the living room. Can I use your phone for a second? I asked. He didn't answer as he was far too distracted by the visuals of characters on his screen. His phone was lying on the table, so I decided to check it anyway without waiting for him to respond. So I picked it up and unlocked it. For a moment, I felt stupid. You're overthinking, this is nothing. I told myself I'd just check one thing. Job applications, emails, maybe job portals, anything that showed effort. I opened his email first, scrolled. Nothing. No applications, no responses, no drafts. Just promotional emails and random subscriptions. A small knot formed in my stomach. Maybe he uses something else. I checked his browser, but his history was too short. Only months-old history logs appeared. That was when the first wave of suspicion truly settled in my heart. It could have meant nothing, but my instincts said otherwise. That feeling in my chest tightened, and then, without really thinking about it, I went to his apps. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just looking, but then I saw a dating app installed and active, hidden in a folder labeled Work. For a second, my brain didn't process it properly, it didn't make sense. We lived together, we slept in the same bed, we shared a life. I opened it, expecting the app to be last used months ago before we started dating. Maybe old harmless massages, maybe an old account he forgot to delete. That's what I told myself as it loaded. But it wasn't empty at all, not even close. There were dozens of active and recent messages dating as latest as last night. My hands went cold as I opened the first chat. It was a girl from another city. Friendly tone, flirty. Nothing explicit, but too familiar. The way he spoke, the way he started conversations. I scrolled. He had sent her flowers last week. There was a picture of a bouquet with a note attached to it. Hope this week's easier on you. My stomach dropped. I had seen that sentence before. The same tone, pattern, script, kind words he spoke to me in past were pasted on several other women's chat. And then I saw something that made everything else click into place in a way that made me feel physically sick. Can't wait to visit you soon. Once I'm settled, I'll come to your city. I want to build something real with you. The same words, recycled and reused, like none of it had ever been real to begin with. My hands were shaking, but my mind wasn't. That's the strange part. I expected to feel overwhelmed, to cry, to panic, to confront him immediately. But instead, Everything went still. Bitter with clarity. Like all the confusion I had been living in for months, suddenly arranged itself into something that made sense. The money, the pocket money, the extra cash that kept disappearing, the lack of effort, the comfort, the absence of urgency. He wasn't stuck, he wasn't struggling, he was operating like a mastermind, using me like a free ride until his new one arrived. I kept scrolling until his social media was next. I had never thought much about it before. He didn't post me, so I told myself he was private. Some people are like that. But now, looking at it through this lens, it wasn't privacy. It was a strategy. No photos with me, no indication of a relationship, just him, always him traveling to different cities all the time. Now suddenly, those trips he used to tell me about during our long-distance year didn't feel the same anymore. They didn't feel like adventures. They felt like a pattern. It was a cycle he followed. Every woman he ever dated was simply a roommate for him. Someone who paid for his part of rent and utilities too, while he got to sit at home and laze around all day playing his video games. Nor was I the first. That realization didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It didn't feel like heartbreak. It did, however, feel like a betrayal that required some payback. I put his phone down exactly where I had found it. He was still playing and laughing, still completely unaware that something had just ended. I didn't say anything that night, not even the next morning. I went to work like usual, came home like usual, spoke to him like nothing had changed. I was only acting normal for the sake of appearance, despite however much I wanted the sight of him gone from my property. Because inside, something had already shut off. When he engaged in conversation too long, I didn't feel the need to argue or explain anymore, because this wasn't something a conversation could fix. This wasn't miscommunication, this wasn't stress. This was a systematic and thoroughly planned fraud. So instead of reacting, I started paying attention. I took pictures and screenshots when I could, not obsessively, just carefully. And then one night, when he was asleep, I did something I never thought I would do. I reached out to the other women, the victims. I didn't go through the dating app. I found them through other platforms, social media, usernames, small clues. At first, I didn't know what I would say. How do you even start that conversation? Hi, I think we're dating the same man. It sounded ridiculous, but I sent the message anyway. Simple, direct. Hi. This might sound strange, but I think we might both be involved with the same person. His name is Kevin. I live with him. I expected silence, maybe even backlash. But that's not what I got. The first reply came within an hour. Most of his exes responded later, but the ones he was currently involved with replied instantly. There was confusion and shock initially, but fortunately they all believed me. Together we discussed until all details started lining up. Our stories overlapped. He had used the same lines, the same gestures, the same flowers. Even down to the same endearments he used were the same for each one of us. Everything was reused with such low effort it was almost disgusting. And then one of them said something that confirmed what I had already started to suspect. He was homeless in reality, kicked out at a young age by his parents, and a broke guy because he never really worked a day of his life. We learned this through one of his exes who also worked as an underground hacker. That was when the full picture started coming together. Not just what he had done to me, but what he had been doing for years. Rotating cities, finding women, building trust, moving in, living off them. And when things started to crack, he left, moved on, started again. I wasn't special at all, just one of his money printing machine. And for the first time since I found the app, I felt something strong. Not sadness, not even anger. Just resolve to let him pay the price for his actions, because this wasn't just about me anymore. Over the next few weeks, things escalated in a way I hadn't planned, but didn't stop either. Even more women came forward with evidence, messages, transfers, patterns. And one of them, someone who had dealt with something similar before, suggested we take it legally. At first, it sounded impossible. The law didn't usually care much about what women went through in their personal life, but the more we looked at it, the more it felt possible. This wasn't just emotional damage. There was financial manipulation and deception too. A repeated system of gaining trust and benefiting from it. A repeated system of gaining trust and benefiting from it. So we did something Kevin would have never expected. We joined hands and organized everything. We documented everything and got a lawyer. I didn't let Kevin know a thing. He was oblivious. I let him keep thinking everything was normal. Let him keep playing his games. Let him keep believing I was still the same person who would apologize, who would adjust, who would carry things quietly. Because this time, I wasn't going to fix anything. I was going to end it properly. I just watched Kevin, the man who had moved in claiming he loved me, who had lived off my patience and my money for months, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Absolute clarity. It was late evening. The living room lights were warm, soft. He was sitting on the couch, headset around his neck, scrolling through his phone like nothing had changed, like he hadn't spent months building a small empire of lies while I tried to survive for both of us. I took a deep breath. Quietly, deliberately, I sat across from him. "Pack your things," I said, my voice low but steady. He blinked. Twice. Then laughed nervously. "Pack? What are you talking about?" I said, "Pack your things, you're leaving." "What? Why?" His voice rose slightly, not in anger but disbelief. "You know why," I said, feeling the weight of every month pressed down behind the words. "I trusted you. I supported you. I believed in you. And you lied. Every day. You've been lying to me, to yourself, to anyone who would fall for your act. You're not staying here anymore." He froze. The smirk he always wore, that mask of charming confidence, faltered. He opened his mouth, then shut it. "You don't understand," he said finally. "I'll find a job. I just need more time. You brought me here." I shook my head slowly. "No, I understand perfectly. I understand that you've been using me, using every woman who trusted you. That's exactly what you do, and I'm done." He swallowed hard, his fingers fumbling with his phone. For a moment, I thought he might finally cry, maybe apologize, maybe beg. But instead, he muttered, "This isn't fair," and started packing his things. Simultaneously, he furiously tapped away at his phone, which I assumed was his attempt at finding a place at his other girlfriend's house. He hadn't expected things to fall out with me so abruptly, with no time for him to finalize his backup plan. He was the one who usually ended things with his exes. I didn't watch. I didn't help. I just let him gather his clothes, his gaming setup, the little things he had brought into my life with so much charm and so little honesty. By the time he was halfway through, there was a knock at the door. I swiftly opened the door and let them in. "Kevin Thomas?" an officer asked. He looked up from his bag, confusion flickering across his face. "Yes?" "You're under arrest for fraud," the officer said, holding up a folder of papers. Kevin's eyes went wide. He looked from the officer to me, searching for some kind of explanation, some miracle that would make this go away. But there wasn't one. Not this time. "Fraud?" he whispered, disbelief cracking his voice. "Yes," the officer said. "You've been manipulating multiple women, obtaining funds under false pretenses, and creating a pattern of financial deception. You're being charged and will be held in custody until your hearing." He tried to argue, tried to reach for his phone, tried to call someone, but the officers gently but firmly guided him toward the door. He turned to me one last time, the panic clear in his eyes. "You can't do this," he shouted as they led him away. "You don't understand. I'll pay everyone back." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I didn't feel anger, sadness, or regret. I only felt relief. Relief that the months of manipulation, lies, and exploitation were finally ending. Relief that he would no longer have the power to charm another unsuspecting woman into the same cycle. Relief that the invisible weight of constant worry and guilt, of trying to keep him afloat while he deliberately avoided responsibility, was lifted. In the following weeks, the legal process unfolded swiftly. Every woman he had deceived joined in, providing evidence of conversations, screenshots, bank transfers, and other proof of his consistent pattern of fraud. A high-level lawyer coordinated everything, and within months, Kevin was fined heavily, sentenced to 2 years in prison, and ordered 2 additional years of community service. One of his exes, a social media influencer who had been unknowingly targeted by him, revealed his entire scheme publicly. His facade, the charming, attentive boyfriend persona, was exposed. Every detail of how he had built options while living off his partner's money came to light. No woman could claim ignorance again. And me? I finally reclaimed my life. No more pretending, no more guilt, no more apologizing for someone else's choices. I was free to live in my own space, to make my own decisions, to breathe without constantly calculating what I needed to do to keep someone else afloat. Kevin thought he was clever, thought he could keep playing the game forever, but in the end the truth caught up with him, and I didn't have to fight alone. For the first time in months I could feel it. Quiet, undeniable freedom. However, Kevin found a way to somehow send anonymous letters through prison, claiming I had ruined his life for nothing, that I was heartless and selfish to kick out a homeless person, that he was just trying his best to get by. So now I ask you, am I the asshole for kicking out my unemployed and homeless boyfriend?